the silent guardian, a bond forged in tragedy. The security checkpoint at Midway International Airport bustled with activity on that frigid January morning. Travelers shuffled through the lines, their faces a mixture of exhaustion and resignation as Chicago's worst blizzard in decades pummeled the city outside. Through this controlled chaos moved Officer Sarah Mitchell and her partner Carter, a German shepherd whose alert amber eyes missed nothing. Carter wasn't just any K-9 officer. 3 years earlier, he had been discovered at a crime scene, standing guard over the body of a murdered toddler. The responding officers had been struck by his unwavering vigilance, how he'd positioned himself between the child and the door despite his own injuries. Most dogs would have been deemed too traumatized for service work after such an experience, but the K-9 training division had recognized something extraordinary in Carter's focused determination. Sarah had been the one to rehabilitate him, spending countless hours rebuilding his trust in humans. What began as a professional challenge evolved into a profound connection that transcended the typical handler-service dog relationship. Together, they developed an uncanny efficiency at airport security, with Carter demonstrating an almost supernatural ability to detect threats that standard training couldn't explain. On this particular morning, Sarah noticed a subtle change in Carter's demeanor as they patrolled Terminal B. His ears shifted forward, his gait stiffening almost imperceptibly. Years of partnership had taught Sarah to recognize these early warning signs, though nothing obvious in their surroundings warranted concern. A businessman hurried past, late for his connection. A young couple argued quietly over their travel itinerary. A well-dressed woman in her 30s gently rocked a sleeping infant bundled against the airport's aggressive air conditioning. Carter's focus locked onto this last figure with an intensity that Sarah had witnessed only twice before in their partnership. A low whine began in his throat, the precursor to something more urgent. The warning. The change in Carter was subtle at first, a stiffening in his posture, a slight shifting of weight forward. Sarah monitored him closely, mentally running through the list of potential threats he might be detecting. Explosives seemed unlikely. Carter's alert for those was different, more direct. Narcotics produced another distinct response pattern. This was something else entirely, something Sarah had seen only during their specialized training sessions. Carter's low whine deepened, his eyes never leaving the well-dressed woman and her infant. The woman herself seemed unremarkable. Designer travel wear, expensive luggage, the exhausted but composed demeanor of a seasoned traveler coping with delays. The baby in her arms remained perfectly still, swaddled in a pale blue blanket against the terminal's chill. When Carter's behavior escalated to a series of sharp, authoritative barks that echoed through the terminal, Sarah felt her professional composure slipping. Travelers nearby shifted nervously away, creating a widening circle of space around them. Smartphones appeared immediately, recording the disruption as Sarah attempted to regain control. "Carter, stand down," she commanded firmly, embarrassment coloring her face as the barking continued. But beneath the embarrassment came a creeping certainty. This wasn't a false alarm or an overwhelmed reaction to the crowd. This specific pattern of behavior, this intensity of focus on a woman and child, Sarah had seen it exactly once before, on a case that had defined both their careers. The well-dressed woman's expression morphed from confused to alarmed. She clutched the sleeping baby closer to her chest, her eyes darting toward the nearest exit as Carter's barking grew more insistent with each passing second. Sarah approached with her most reassuring smile, maintaining firm control of Carter's leash. "I'm so sorry about this," she offered, noting that the dog's barking had been replaced by intense focus and the occasional high-pitched whine that Sarah recognized as a signal for something deeply wrong. "He's normally extremely well-behaved." The confrontation. "It's fine," the woman replied, her polished voice carrying a slight tremor beneath its confident surface. "But I really need to catch my connection. We've already been delayed for hours." Sarah noticed that despite the woman's words, she was backing away slowly, creating more distance between herself and Carter. More troubling was the baby, who remained motionless throughout the commotion, unnaturally still despite the loud barking that had just subsided. "Which flight are you catching?" Sarah asked, keeping her tone conversational while her trained eye caught subtle inconsistencies. The woman's designer luggage showed scuff patterns inconsistent with normal travel wear. Though she wore a wedding ring, there was no indentation in her finger suggesting long-term wear. "American to Minneapolis, then connecting to Seattle," the woman replied quickly. "Too quickly. My husband is waiting for us." Carter had shifted into a behavior pattern that Sarah had only observed during specialized training sessions, a rhythmic movement between focusing on the woman's face and the baby, then back again. Not alerting to contraband or weapons, but to the relationship itself. Your baby is sleeping soundly through all this, Sarah observed, nodding toward the infant who hadn't stirred, flinched, or reacted at all to the previous barking. How old? 6 months, the woman answered, then immediately corrected herself. I mean almost 7 months now. Her free hand fluttered nervously to the silk scarf around her neck. Please, my gate. I understand, Sarah nodded, making a show of checking her watch. American to Minneapolis, you said? That's interesting, because all American flights to Minneapolis were canceled 3 hours ago due to the storm. They made an announcement. The woman's composure fractured momentarily, her eyes widening before she regained control. I meant United. It's been such a long day. I'm getting confused with all the changes. Would you mind if I just check your travel documents? With all the confusion today, we're helping passengers confirm their flight information, Sarah said, positioning herself subtly to block the nearest exit. That won't be necessary, the woman said, her voice hardening as she took another step backward. We're already late. Sarah's voice dropped, quiet enough that only the woman could hear. The baby hasn't moved at all during this entire interaction. Not even a fidget during Carter's barking. Most babies would at least stir for the briefest moment. Something cold flickered behind the woman's eyes. She's a good sleeper. Ma'am, I'm going to need to see some identification and the baby's travel documents, Sarah said, no longer asking. It's standard procedure when traveling with infants. The unraveling. The security office walls were a bland, institutional beige, designed to be forgettable. Inside, the woman, who had identified herself as Elizabeth Coleman, sat rigidly in a metal chair, her makeup now smudged from tears. The infant had been taken for emergency medical evaluation after showing signs of sedation. Carter remained on high alert, positioned near the doorway, his body language communicating continued concern. Detective James Harlow from the Chicago PD Special Victims Unit arrived within 40 minutes, his weathered face grave as he reviewed the preliminary report. Her real name is Rebecca Morris, he explained, showing Sarah a file on his tablet. Released 4 weeks ago from Pinewood Psychiatric Hospital after an 8-month involuntary commitment. The photo matched their detainee, though in the file Rebecca appeared disheveled and vacant-eyed, a stark contrast to the polished facade she presented at the airport. What was she in for? Sarah asked, watching as Carter maintained his vigilant position. Severe postpartum psychosis following the death of her infant daughter from SIDS 7 months ago, Harlow replied. She was found attempting to take a baby from a shopping mall, claiming it was her child. The doctors thought she was responding well to treatment, but clearly, he gestured toward the emergency care unit where the baby was being examined. And the baby? Do we know who she is? Harlow nodded grimly. Her name is Olivia Wells, 7 months old, reported missing from her home in Milwaukee yesterday. The mother is Rebecca's cousin, Megan Wells. She's flying in now, should be here within the hour. Sarah processed this information, the pieces fitting together with grim logic. So Rebecca took her cousin's baby, sedated her to keep her quiet during travel, and was attempting to flee the state? That's our working theory, Harlow confirmed. Though there are still unanswered questions. Rebecca doesn't drive and had no access to substantial funds. Someone helped her get to Milwaukee, take the baby, and make it to Chicago with what appeared to be professionally forged documents. Carter's ears suddenly perked up, his attention shifting toward the office entrance. Sarah had learned to trust these subtle alerts. Her partner had detected something significant. What is it? Boy, she murmured, following Carter's gaze to where a man in a tailored suit was speaking with the desk sergeant, his hospital ID badge prominently displayed. That's Dr. William Fletcher, Harlow explained, noticing Carter's reaction. Rebecca's psychiatrist from Pinewood. He called it in when he heard she'd been detained. Says he's concerned about her mental state during questioning. Carter's posture had changed dramatically, the relaxed vigilance replaced by rigid alertness, the same behavior he displayed toward Rebecca earlier. Sarah had worked with him long enough to recognize the pattern. Her partner had identified another threat. The puppet master. The sterile hospital lighting cast harsh shadows across Rebecca's face as she sat hunched in the interview room, all pretense stripped away by the reality of her situation. I just wanted her back, she whispered when Sarah entered, not looking up. They told me she was gone, but mothers know. We always know. You're talking about your daughter, Sarah said gently, taking the seat across from her. The one who died. Rebecca's gaze snapped up, suddenly fierce. She didn't die? That's what they want everyone to believe. William showed me the truth. How they take babies from mothers they deem unfit and place them with more suitable families. My cousin's baby, she looks just like my Emma. It can't be coincidence. William, Sarah prompted. You mean Dr. Fletcher? He understands, Rebecca continued, her words tumbling out faster. He's seen it happen to other mothers too. The system declaring them unstable, taking their children, faking deaths. He helped me see that Olivia is really Emma. They just gave her to my cousin when they took her from me. Sarah maintained a compassionate expression while mentally connecting the disturbing dots. And Dr. Fletcher helped you get to Milwaukee? Helped you take Olivia? Rebecca nodded, a childlike trust in her eyes. He said once we were far away, he could prove it was Emma with DNA tests. That we'd be a family again. Did he give you the medication for Olivia? To keep her quiet during travel? Just baby Benadryl, Rebecca defended. He's a doctor. He gave me the right dose, said it would make the transition easier for Emma, for Olivia, until she remembered me. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. Sarah excused herself, finding Harlow in the hallway and briefing him quickly on Rebecca's statements. A commotion from the direction of the pediatric unit interrupted them. Raised voices, the sound of equipment crashing to the floor. They rushed back to find hospital security attempting to restrain Dr. Fletcher, who had somehow gained access to Olivia's treatment room despite protocols. Carter stood between the doctor and the infant's bed, his posture defensive but controlled, exactly as he'd been trained. This is outrageous, Fletcher shouted, his professional demeanor cracking. I'm this child's doctor. I have every right to examine her. As security escorted Fletcher from the room, Sarah noticed him slip something into his pocket, a small vial that glinted under the hospital lights. Carter's focused attention on that same pocket confirmed her suspicion. Detective, I believe Dr. Fletcher just attempted to take a DNA sample from Olivia, Sarah said quietly to Harlow. If he's been manipulating Rebecca's delusions. The hidden pattern. The storage unit on Chicago's north side stood unremarkable among hundreds of identical orange doors. Unit 217, rented under a shell company traced back to Fletcher, was secured with both a digital lock and heavy padlock. The search warrant had been expedited based on mounting evidence, but Carter's behavior suggested whatever lay beyond that door was worse than they'd anticipated. When the lock finally yielded with a metallic click, Carter stepped back, positioning himself beside Sarah, as if seeking reassurance before facing whatever lay within. The storage unit contained no people, no immediate threats, but what it revealed was perhaps more disturbing for its methodical organization. One wall was covered with photographs, news clippings, and medical records, all relating to infants and young children. Another held medical equipment, including sedatives identical to those used on Olivia. But most disturbing was the center of the room, where a nursery had been meticulously assembled. Crib, changing table, rocking chair, all arranged as if waiting for a child. Carter moved carefully through the space, his training allowing him to navigate without disturbing evidence. He stopped at a filing cabinet in the corner, alerting with the specific pattern he used for documents of interest. Inside, they found what appeared to be Fletcher's private case files, detailed psychological profiles of dozens of women who had lost children, all patients at various institutions where he'd worked over the years. Each file contained annotations about susceptibility to reconditioning and potential for maternal reclamation project. Carter suddenly gave a sharp, alert bark, the specific signal he'd been trained to use when finding concealed evidence. He stood rigid, focused on what appeared to be an ordinary section of drywall. The forensics team moved in with their equipment, quickly confirming a hidden compartment. Behind the false wall, they discovered what transformed the case from exploitation to something far darker. USB drives containing videos of Fletcher interviewing his patients, gradually reshaping their perceptions through careful manipulation. More disturbing were the files documenting failed reclamations, cases where his subjects had been caught or had failed to retrieve the targeted children. They found detailed plans for manipulating a current patient named Caroline Warner into believing her recently deceased infant was actually alive and being raised by a neighbor in Detroit. The timing in his notes showed this was scheduled for next week. An emergency database search revealed the most disturbing pattern of all. Over the past 5 years, at least 6 women under Fletcher's care had been arrested attempting to abduct children they believed were their own. In each case, Fletcher had appeared as an expert witness, testifying to their mental instability and securing their commitment to institutions where he had practicing privileges. But what was his ultimate goal? The answer lay in a personnel file from 12 years earlier. Fletcher had lost custody of his son in a bitter divorce after his ex-wife had presented evidence of his psychological manipulation. The court had granted her an unusual degree of protection, including sealed records and relocation assistance. Fletcher's son had effectively disappeared from public records. The pattern became clear. Fletcher wasn't just exploiting vulnerable women. He was using them as test subjects, perfecting techniques of psychological manipulation and child abduction that he ultimately intended to use himself. The Silent Guardian. The search for Fletcher's son expanded across 5 states, with Carter working alongside specialized teams. His unique abilities proved invaluable as they narrowed their focus to a remote lakeside cabin in northern Michigan. The operation unfolded with practiced precision. Within 20 minutes, tactical teams had secured the cabin and its occupant, a young woman who identified herself as Andrea Wesley, a nursing student hired through a private agency to care for a Dr. Mitchell's son while he was traveling for work. The boy, found sleeping peacefully in a carefully decorated bedroom, appeared healthy and well cared for. Now awake, he watched the officers with solemn eyes that seemed too old for his 8 years. "Hello," Sarah said gently, kneeling to his eye level while Carter sat patiently beside her. "My name is Sarah. This is Carter." The child's focus immediately shifted to the dog, something softening in his guarded expression. "He's beautiful," he said quietly. "Is he nice?" "Very nice," Sarah assured him. "Would you like to pet him? He's especially trained to help children feel safe." Carter moved forward with gentle precision, lowering his head to make himself less intimidating. The boy reached out hesitantly, then with more confidence when Carter responded with a soft whine of encouragement. "What's your name?" Sarah asked as the child stroked Carter's fur. "Michael," he replied. "But sometimes Dad calls me Christopher for safety." He paused, his small hand resting on Carter's head. "Is my dad in trouble?" "Sometimes grown-ups don't tell the truth," she said gently. "But we're going to find out exactly what happened and make sure you're with people who will take very good care of you." The subsequent investigation revealed the devastating truth. Michael's mother hadn't abandoned him as Fletcher had claimed. Jennifer Fletcher had been fighting desperately to regain custody of her son for over 7 years, hampered by falsified psychological evaluations and manipulated court records, all orchestrated by her ex-husband, who had used his professional credentials to systematically discredit her. The reunion, when it finally happened under careful supervision at the Children's Advocacy Center, broke and mended Sarah's heart simultaneously. Jennifer fell to her knees when she saw Michael, tears streaming down her face as she held out trembling arms. The boy hesitated, years of his father's conditioning evident in his uncertainty. Carter, still by Michael's side, gently nudged him forward, a subtle encouragement that seemed to give him the confidence he needed. He took one step, then another, before finally running into his mother's embrace. "My baby," Jennifer sobbed, holding him as if she might never let go. "My beautiful boy." As they watched Jennifer and Michael begin the delicate process of rebuilding their relationship, Sarah reflected on the chain of events that had led to this moment. What had started with Carter's unexpected barking at an airport had uncovered a scheme of manipulation and exploitation spanning years, all because a traumatized dog had developed an extraordinary ability to sense when parent-child relationships weren't what they appeared to be. "Your partner is something special," Harlow observed, nodding toward Carter, who had settled into a watchful position near Michael and his mother. "Most canines are trained to find specific threats, drugs, explosives, suspects, but Carter finds the truth." "That's what trauma did for him," Sarah replied thoughtfully. "When he couldn't save that little girl 3 years ago, something fundamental changed in how he perceives the world. He's constantly looking for children in danger, constantly assessing the authenticity of the adults around them. A blessing from a tragedy." Later that evening, as Sarah completed her final report on the case, Carter dozed beside her desk, occasionally twitching in his sleep. The department had been buzzing all day with news of their success, with the chief personally stopping by to commend them on their work. "Good boy," she whispered as Carter's eyes opened briefly, meeting hers with that familiar, intelligent gaze before drifting closed again. "You did good." Outside, the Chicago night had settled over the city, stars emerging in the darkening sky. Tomorrow would bring new cases, new challenges, but for tonight they had earned their rest. Because sometimes, Sarah reflected, watching her partner sleep, the deepest wounds create the most remarkable healing, not just for those who are rescued, but for the rescuers themselves. In the silence of the office, With only the gentle breathing of her canine partner for company, Sarah understood something profound about the nature of guardianship. Carter's extraordinary perception hadn't come from his training or his breeding, but from his broken heart, a heart that had transformed its pain into an unwavering commitment to prevent others from suffering the same fate. And in that transformation lay a lesson about resilience that transcended species, how sometimes our greatest strengths emerge from our deepest wounds, and how the drive to protect others can become the very thing that ultimately heals us. The wounds that make us stronger. In the shadows of our broken places, something extraordinary often emerges. Just as Carter's trauma transformed him into a guardian with preternatural abilities, our own suffering can awaken heightened perceptions within us. The reality of service animals and law enforcement isn't far from this fiction. Across America, K-9 officers with uncanny intuition save lives daily. Some handlers swear their partners possess a sixth sense, an ability to detect malice, fear, or deception where human eyes see nothing amiss. These bonds, forged through countless hours of training and shared purpose, create partnerships that transcend mere professional collaboration. They become something sacred, two beings completing each other's strengths, compensating for each other's weaknesses. In our own lives, too, we've witnessed how trauma survivors often develop remarkable abilities. The abused child who grows up with an unerring radar for detecting predatory behavior. The grief-stricken parent who channels loss into advocacy that protects countless others. We are, all of us, shaped by our wounds. The question isn't whether we'll be broken. Life guarantees that. But whether we'll allow our broken places to become doorways through which something powerful and redemptive might enter. Sometimes, like Carter, our greatest gift to the world emerges from the very pain we wished we'd never known. Thank you for watching this heartfelt story. We hope it touched your heart and left you with something meaningful to reflect on. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, leave a comment to share your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more inspiring stories like this. Your support means the world to us. See you in the next video.